Hi there, Colin Lamb here. I hope you're doing very well wherever it is that you may happen to be. I'm doing fine. I'm just driving around here in between jobs in the beautiful South Australian rolling hillside, which is rapidly becoming more brown than green. But at any rate, I recently bought tickets to go see the Stone Temple Pilots in March here in South Australia, in Adelaide, and they're going to be supported by Wolfmother. I have to admit, I was on the fence about the show because the tickets were a bit pricey. I think it's going to be like about $150 a ticket after all the service fees. That being said, it's a relatively small venue, and the Stone Temple Pilots are probably one of my favorite 90s bands, which is what I really want to talk about in this video. But they're also going to be supported by Wolfmother, which I found to be intriguing because after Wolfmother's first couple of hits and their songs being featured on the NHL, I think NHL 98 or something, I can't remember what year it was, but that's the first time I heard Wolfmother. Maybe it was later than that, maybe it was the 2000s. Anyways, this isn't about Wolfmother and it's not about NHL 2000, which is what I think it was. But I got to thinking about Stone Temple Pilots, and I decided that I had to go see the show because they are one of my favorite 90s bands. And in fact, I would go so far as to say in this video that they are my favorite 90s band, and I think one of the, if not the greatest of those, quote, alternative or grunge bands. And it actually, the thing that kind of sparked my final decision was that I was shuffling through some 90s playlists and Nirvana came on and I skipped it. And I think it was a song, I think it was In Bloom or something like that. I can't remember what song it was, but I just skipped it. And then I asked myself, when was the last time I listened to a Nirvana song the full way through, or even listened at all without skipping? And that kind of made me sad because Nirvana occupies a space in my mind that I associate with a very specific period of my childhood. It was for me, I would have been just 9 or 10 years old when that came out. My brother, who was 3 years older than me, was definitely more affected by Nirvana, like to the point where he, dyed his hair, wore a dirty old cardigan, and kind of became a vagrant to a certain degree, I will say, and started writing music. And his persona, I could see it definitely at the time, whether he would admit to it or not, definitely kind of became Kurt Cobain. So there was a huge impact there in my life. And I remember getting the Unplugged tape for Christmas one year, and I love that album. I do, in all fairness, I will listen to that, but not all the time. And I started to think, why am I still listening to Stone Temple Pilots like almost daily, and I'm not listening to Nirvana anymore when they are the king of all those bands, if you want to look at what people would usually say if you asked about that period of music. And I think that there's a couple of points that I'll bring up why I feel like I listen to them more, which is a factual statement, but I also feel like they're a better band than Nirvana ever were. And there's obviously some metrics there that we can't control. Kurt Cobain killed himself early on and stopped the band's creative output. We don't know what they would have achieved in the long term. So that's unfair. That'd be the main metric by which I think we could say that it might be a bit of an unfair comparison. If you can think of anything else, let me know in the comments. But I would just say that tonally, the Stone Temple Pilots music has more of a range. The early grunge stuff, the loud, heavy stuff that they did, and they did keep doing loud and heavy throughout their career, but that early stuff was in some ways comparable to Nirvana and may have been a reaction to Nirvana or inspired by Nirvana. There was a lot of that heavy, soft thing going on, a lot of that angsty, moody stuff. But as the Stone Temple Pilots progressed, I think that their music became more their own. I think that definitely getting a record contract in the early 90s and sounding a bit like Nirvana or Pearl Jam wouldn't fucking hurt anybody. And that is to say that anybody can look at whatever popular music is happening around them and say, well, the only thing you need to do to get successful is just make music like that. But we know that's not the case. Otherwise, everyone and their bald asshole would be writing, quote, pop music that is on trend or whatever you want to say, and they would be experiencing similar to success to the artists that they're emulating. But that's just not the truth. You still need to have the skills, you still need to have the command of melody, you still need to have the charisma, the stage performance, and then the execution to put it all together into something that people ultimately want to listen to, which Stone Temple Pilots, you could say, did. Yes, in their early years it was maybe a bit formulaic, but as they blossom, I could just rattle off a few songs that I think just sound like the Stone Temple Pilots. Sour Girl, which I was listening to the other day, I think that's mainly an acoustic song, but there's not too many songs that sound like that to me. Lady Picture Show, I think you could say, was maybe a bit of a throwback song to the 60s, but there's a big range coming from the earlier tracks, like, and I apologize, I'm driving, I seem to recall the names of all the specific tracks right off the top of my head, but the early stuff, even something like Interstate Love Song versus moving to something like Lady Picture Show or Sour Girl, there's a big tonal range there that I don't think is present in Nirvana. Not that I'm picking on Nirvana in any way, but I just find that the Stone Temple Pilots' long-term listening has been more of a redemptive and positive experience for me. And that's, to me, what music is. Like, maybe it's just the time of my life that I'm occupying now. Maybe I'm completely detached from that angsty, dark Nirvana stuff. And maybe Stone Temple Pilots were allowed to move on from that era emotionally. But I think there are some similarities in the artists that maybe make me think, well, why one could do that and not the other. I mean, Scott Weiland, although wasn't the main creative force, was the singer of Stone Temple Pilots, obviously, and he was a drug-addicted person, and he and Kurt Cobain, they both died, you could argue, either of drug addiction related issues or mental health related issues, and you could argue that there's not much of a difference between those two things, and one begets the other, but they both died, and so the idea that because Kurt was so, quote, depressed or whatever, he didn't have the same sort of positive output. I think if you want to look at the other band members, obviously Dave Grohl and Chris weren't as creatively maybe involved as the two brothers in Stone Temple Pilots, and the drummer, who all three of those had contributions on writing lyrics and songs whatsoever, particularly the bass player, who did a really good interview with Rick Beato. If you want to go check that out, I'll put a link to that in the description. But he was a major creative force in that band, and maybe he wasn't coming from the same dark spot that Scott Weiland was, and maybe that's the tempering force, and that maybe in that degree, maybe Stone Temple Pilots was more of a conglomeration. Maybe despite Dave Grohl's bubbly and positive personality, he just couldn't temper Kurt's creative negativity or his negative emotions because he didn't have as much control input. He wasn't putting as much color into the music, or it was just limited by what he could do on the drums. I don't know, but I just find that the feeling that I get from Stone Temple Pilots as I've matured through life, and definitely harkening back to the time when the music was coming out, is more positive than Nirvana. And maybe not all music doesn't need to be positive. Definitely Nirvana's music is beautiful, but I will say that acoustic album that they did, which was really their last big creative output, and while Kurt was alive, was beautiful and uplifting, and maybe it represents what could have been a tipping point for that band. Who knows what Kurt would have given us in the long run, and that's the real tragedy. But I guess I would just say I'm just going to say, you can't argue taste, but I enjoy the music of the Stone Temple Pilots more than I enjoy Nirvana, and I consistently go back to them for that enjoyment more so than I do for Nirvana. So let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. I'm sure I missed a few salient speaking points that I thought of before this video, but hey, let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. Please subscribe to my channel if you feel like it. At the very least, take very good care of yourself, and I'll see you in a future video. Bye-bye.